we created 10,000 millionaires among our employees in the 1990s. I had a $3.2 billion handshake at noon, and we had it through both board of directors announced Monday morning. That is speed. I never dreamed that I'd have 9 startups that were unicorns.
Humans of Bombay welcomes its biggest international guest, John Chambers. He's a leader who shaped the digital revolution, advised startups across the globe. He's a former CEO of Cisco and a multi-millionaire venture capitalist.
For Steve in particular, he was an amazing creative leader. He just somehow knew how to build products. And I said, those that have been hacked and those that don't know they've been hacked. You very rarely have a great company without a great culture. Warren Buffett said it very well over a decade ago. Culture eats strategy and vision for breakfast and lunch and dinner.
You've spoken a lot about your journey with dyslexia and the learnings that you've had.
If you're dyslexic and kids laugh at you, you never laugh at others. When you overcome hurdles, you learn that you can do it again and again. You can achieve goals that many other people wouldn't even challenge themselves to try. When I joined IBM, they were on top of the world, but because they didn't change, they lost ground. So I've learned the hard way. You either disrupt or you get disrupted. And we laid off 37,584 people, if I remember right. Leadership is very lonely. How you handle your setbacks determine more who you are than how you handle your successes. I believe he is the best leader in the world. In this current next 5 years, I think he'll set the stage for the century.
You've also been awarded the Padma Bhushan.
I would say by the end of the century, India will probably be 90% bigger economy-wise than China and probably 30% bigger than the US. When Prime Minister Modi came in, I got asked to lead what became the US-India Strategic Partnership Forum.
John, you took Cisco from 1.2 billion to over 40 billion. The one trait that attributed to that success. Welcome to Humans of Bombay, John. Thank you so much for doing this and for your time. I'm extremely honored to be here.
Karishma, it's going to be my pleasure. Let's make this the best interview you do.
Yeah, I'm
best
sure
podcast.
It's going to be. Yeah, the best podcast, I'm sure.
Okay.
So thank you, John. And your name is synonymous with leadership, from Cisco to everything that you're building with startups and companies and coaching right now. You also interface with some of the top leaders in the world, and closer to home, you have a great friendship with PM Modi of India as well. So in your experience and journey, what is that one quality that most leaders hone in their journey?
I think the one quality that leaders really focus on, consciously or subconsciously, is the ability to get people to trust them and to earn that. So you think about the one quality, it's your track record, and then it's about the relationship you form and then trust. And most great leaders around the world do that very well, whether it's Prime Minister Modi in India, President Macron in France, or leaders of companies as well.
Yeah, that's, you also have a huge focus on culture. So
absolutely.
Talk to me a little bit about that.
Well, many times, especially with young CEOs, they think about it, it's about strategy and vision. And when in fact, Warren Buffett said it very well over a decade ago, culture eats strategy and vision for breakfast and lunch and dinner. I think they're actually balanced, but you very rarely have a great company without a great culture. Now, cultures might be different between a Microsoft and a Cisco or other companies, but culture is a huge amount about who you are, how you interface to your customers, what's important to you value-wise, how we interface as a family, and I do believe a company is a family.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to go back on that note to your growing up years and your childhood years. You've spoken a lot about your journey with dyslexia and the learnings that you've had throughout that early phase, the nascent phase. So walk me through what are some of the ideals that you had growing up, and what was life like for you growing up in West Virginia?
Well, I grew up in a small state called West Virginia, less than 2 million people, a state that was very wonderful and is very wonderful. I love the state today, and I was just there a couple weeks ago. Now, from a personal point of view, my parents were both doctors. They taught me that you deal with life the way it is, not the way you wish it was. It was an honor having parents who were always there for you. With dyslexia, it's a learning disability. And at first, I just thought I wasn't very quick. And of course, every parent tells their children you're smart. But what they did was allow me to connect with a key teacher called Mrs. Anderson, who was dealing with learning disabilities. It wasn't even called dyslexia then. And she helped me understand, how did I deal with this type of challenge and how did you overcome it? Once you learn to do that in your personal life, you can do it in your business life as well. And the same thing's true. You suddenly set goals that people say might not be obtainable, and you say, well, if I do this right and do it differently, you can achieve goals that many other people wouldn't even challenge themselves to try.
Right. And do you think that that was one of the traits that built that I can achieve whatever I set my mind to attitude?
I think it built a subtle confidence that many of us need in life. If you're dyslexic and kids laugh at you, you never laugh at others. So I treat everybody like we're equals, which we are. Also very sensitive to people's emotion and what's important to them. Far from perfect, as my wife would remind me regularly, but I do connect with people. I form friendships for life. That's my tagline, but I really mean it in terms of the direction. So I think when you overcome hurdles, you learn that you can do it again and again, and it also teaches you your values in life. On the other hand, I saw what happened in our state of West Virginia. Because we didn't change, we fell from being in the top 10 states in every category to the bottom 5. And that was a lesson learned hard that was repeated at IBM, where when I joined IBM out of 9 years of college, and I was a professional student in many ways, in multiple degrees, they were on top of the world. But because they didn't change, they lost ground. Then I was with a mini computer called Wang Laboratories. They were on top of the world. They didn't change and move to the next transition, which are PCs and servers. The Compaqs of the world, the HPs of the world, etc. The Dells of the world got on top there. But because they missed the internet, it didn't change. Then it's clouds, and now it's AI. So I've learned the hard way. You either disrupt or you get disrupted. And you've got to build a culture and a confidence in yourself that change, even though it makes us all uncomfortable, is an important part of our future, especially as you introduce areas like AI into this future, which is going to really accelerate it.
Right, absolutely. And with Cisco, obviously, it was just a phenomenal journey. But talk to me about the early days of Cisco and what was your vision for the company. You've often spoken about the fact that you disrupt or you look to future trends right now. So. When you joined, what was it that you wanted to accomplish?
Well, it was fascinating because this teaches you a lot about values in life as well. I had a very successful career, at least it looked very good on paper, at both IBM and then at Wang Laboratories. And when I made the decision it was time for me to leave, I thought I'd send out my resume and I'd get the job offers coming in. And it was very humbling because when I sent out my resume, nobody offered me a job. And I ended up having the good fortune to have 22 opportunities working. 21 were through networks. And how I treated people in life, those are the people that helped me at a different time and the approach. And I ended up at Cisco. I was never going to get the offer there because the search firm that had that had already made the mistake of presenting me to 2 other companies in Silicon Valley, both of whom offered me jobs. And they normally don't do that. They usually just focus on one company. So how I treated somebody many years before at both IBM and Wang, that person knew that I was interviewing at Cisco, called up my wife and said, he ought to be the CEO here at Cisco. And that's how the contact happened. But it also goes back to any of us that have ever looked for a job, you know how lonely that can be. And it goes back to culture and how you treat people comes back later in life to benefit you if you do it right.
Right. And you know, there were extreme challenges as well with the dot-com burst that happened. The stock price almost fell 88%. How were you dealing with challenges then?
Well, we had the great fortune to have 40 quarters in a row of beating expectation every quarter by 1 to 3 cents. We created 10,000 millionaires among our employees in the 1990s, which a million was probably 3 times that value today. We'd won every award imaginable, both as a company, corporate social responsibility, giving back as a CEO, etc. And we were very good at our analytics. And so I almost knew a quarter ahead of time what my next quarter would be. And so it was a surprise. And it's one of the lessons learned that I will repeat and try not to make as we move forward, is you learn more from your mistakes than you do your successes. And if you keep doing the right thing too long, that can often get you in as much trouble as not doing the right thing. So my analytics changed in terms of the market, et cetera. And so I got surprised. It took me about a week. I was expecting in the first week of December 70% growth, and we did 70%. So I forecast for the next quarter 45 to 50% growth, which looked really safe based on prior numbers. And all of a sudden, the second week in January, we were minus 45%. I'd never been below 40% ever. And we were negative, which I thought was mathematically impossible. Back to the training from my parents, deal with the world the way it is, not the way you wish it was. I immediately got on a plane. I went around the world talking to customers, talking to markets, bankers, et cetera. And I came back and felt that we were headed into a major problem in the tech industry, and that I needed to move rapidly. And I made a decision literally the day I landed and thought about it. I called up my team and said, let's be in the office the next morning. I said, we're going to restructure the whole company. We're going to announce major layoffs, which is really painful because I'd hired every one of those employees. There were only 400 people at the company when I joined, and at this time we had almost 60,000. And I knew them and their families. So it was brutal. It was very difficult, obviously, for them as well. And we laid off 37,584 people, if I remember right. All of a sudden, people were second-guessing my culture, second-guessing my ability to lead the company, second-guessing maybe Cisco's best times are over. And that was painful. But it wasn't the criticism as much as I felt like I'd let down our customers, our employees, our shareholders. Now, it didn't help that we came through this better than all of our peers. We were just the first ones in. We dealt with the world the way that we understood it to be. But for me, it was the hardest year of my life, and it was very lonely. Leadership, as Shimon Peres taught me, the late president of Israel, leadership is very lonely. I didn't understand what he meant at first. I haven't gone through the .com bust.
Yeah. So how is it that you maneuvered this year, right? Because it sounds extremely overwhelming from the outside even to even hear about it. So how do you maneuver this extremely challenging time?
Well, the first thing we do is like many things in life. When something happens very negative that you hadn't expect, it's a period of grief and second guessing and wishing it hadn't happened on it. And then you've got to deal with it. You've got to say, am I the right leader to be able to do that? And I decided that I was. My board agreed. And then I said, let's be realistic on how much of it was self-inflicted and how much market. I felt the majority was market-inflicted. There were things we absolutely had to do better, but you have to improve them both together. We moved very quickly on it. We had all of our changes done and implemented in 51 days, and most of my peers hadn't even started to deal with the .com bust. We gained market share during the turnaround. A year later, and it was the most painful business year imaginable on it. And we treated the people who we did lay off very, very well. And many people a decade later said, you did with class, we wish it hadn't happened, but you did with class the way we would expect a culture to be. At the end of the year, Jack Welch, who was a leader in the generation in front of me in business, he had told me about 4 years before, I asked him, what does it take to have a great company? And I was thinking Cisco was pretty close. We were on our way to becoming the most valuable company ever and winning all these awards. And he said, a near-death experience. And I didn't get what he meant at that time. And I said, I had a tough time in prior years, in 93 and 97, et cetera. And he said, no, John, I mean something that really can shake the foundation of the company or your foundation, its leaders. He called me up at the end of 2001. And he said, John, I'm proud to share with you that you now are a great leader and you have a great company. I said, Jack, it doesn't feel like it. My shareholders are upset with me. Some of the people on some of the key broadcast stations who I thought were extremely good friends and had always been very fair to me were really brutal on it overall. And I feel like I let people down. He said, no, this was your best leadership year ever because it's how you handle the tough times in life determine who you are. And I said, Jack, you're probably going to be the only one that ever says that to me. And by the way, he was the only one. But it's a lesson learned from your listeners. how you handle your setbacks determine more who you are than how you handle your successes. We all like to talk about successes. Here's the roadmap for it. And at a minimum, it's kind of equal weight in terms of the two.
Right. You've also mentioned in one of your interviews that one of the biggest mistakes you made as CEO was to not make decisions fast enough, to be slow on decision making.
Okay.
How is it that one can handle the dichotomy, right, of making decisions quickly,
Yes.
but making sure that it's the right decision and there's not too much exposure in terms of risk?
Okay. So two parallel concepts. First, that I believe decision making, especially during periods of rapid transition, good or bad, has to be very quick. And you can move 20% of your data gives you 80% of the knowledge you need to make the decisions. So at Cisco, probably depending on when that quote was pulled, I said that many people might have looked back and criticized me for moving too fast at Cisco the majority of time. I would argue that actually our ability to move fast is what gave us advantages in the market. The ability to do 180 acquisitions, to find an acquisition's name on a Wednesday night because the head of the NASDAQ said, "John, you're an idiot." And I said, "Why, Bob?" And he said, "Because you're not acquiring this company. Everybody knows your competitors are all over it. It's public knowledge that this company is going to be bought by one of your competitors, and this is perfect for you." And I asked him the name of the company. I didn't even know who it was. I was a little bit embarrassed, but I called up the CEO that night and I said, "Could my business development guy talk to you the next morning?" He said, "Fine." My business development guy went over at 8 in the morning, called me at 9 and said, "John, you got to get over here." I met with the CEO. I looked at his vision, my vision, where they fit into our strategy, opening up new markets, what we could do together. Cultures were very similar. I had a $3.2 billion handshake at noon, and we had it through both board of directors and announced Monday morning. We were at their site, HR, everybody there, and executing. That is speed.
Yeah.
But it goes back to speed works well when you have a process behind it. So most of what I do in business has a playbook. And unlike I thought originally as a young leader, I thought a playbook was bureaucracy. It causes you to not be as innovative and move too slow. It's the reverse. It allows you to move with tremendous speed. So I respectfully would challenge those who say I move too fast. If I had it to do over again, I would actually move faster. Now, to the second part of the question, on making decisions about people, the mistake that young leaders make, and I made several times and still occasionally do, is when somebody's working very hard, they're very good people, they encompass your values, etc., and they're not getting the job done. I try to be too slow. I am too slow and often addressing that. And what you don't realize is you're not doing that person a service. It's actually a disservice, but you also, other people move from that being that leader's problem to it's your problem because you didn't step up to it. So the mistake that young leaders make, and almost all of them do, is on moving on when they have a problem that isn't going to get resolved. They take too long to address it, especially if it's somebody that you like and is working hard and you care about.
Yeah, that's the biggest dichotomy, right? To balance the two worlds.
Yes, but as a leader, when you balance it the wrong way, it's your problem. It's not that person's problem. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
John, you took Cisco from 1.2 billion to over 40 billion
Yes.
in your time there. So
Yes.
what would you say is the one trait that attributed to that success?
Well, if I think about it, I think the traits formed actually when I first joined the company as the number 2 in January of 1991, 70 million in sales and 400 people. And the trait that really helped me the most was very quickly, I said, this internet is not something that moves around zeros and ones to the techies. This is a trait that is going to change business and change the way you work, live, learn, and play. And even my marketing team did not like that word, but it did. And so the trait there was seeing a business market transition, changing every aspect of business and our personal lives with the internet, which it did. And nobody believed that what I said and the 1993 time period was going to come true. It is getting those market transitions right, enabled by new technologies. A parallel in 1997 said that voice will become free. Sounds basic today, but at that time, 90% of the revenue of service providers, the biggest service providers in the world, whether it's in India or the US or in Europe. It was the majority of their profits and revenues. And I said this would become free. But what it was a trend that was going to occur because of the internet that was inevitable, and it was. And so seeing those trends ahead of time, the ability in 2011 to say that every country, every company, every person becomes a digital person, it sounded way out there, but that actually is what Prime Minister Modi did over the last 7 years in India. Digital India was his platform for really getting economic success, inclusion going very well in terms of the direction. And he is, you talk about a leader that I admire tremendously. I think he's the best in the world at the present time. In terms of all the way to 2015, we said at the World Economic Forum that there are only two types of companies in this room. I was giving the keynote there, and I said those that have been hacked and those that don't know they've been hacked. And my message is simple. This is going to happen to everyone. If you don't change dramatically your view on security, cybersecurity in particular, you're going to get into real trouble. And this is going to be an industry that's going to change. And then in literally 7.5 years ago, I felt that AI would be the next major frontier. It's where I felt that the transition would be bigger than the internet and the cloud combined, and people couldn't even spell AI at that time. And yet I made bets on two companies out of India, interestingly enough, in Safe Securities, Ket Modi's company, and also in Unifor, Umesh's company, that ended up being the leaders in their individual fields. So it is understanding the transitions and then getting with it, I think, is the number one thing that if you can do that as a leader, it's a key advantage. Now, back to the characteristics, it's what we talked a little bit about earlier. Characteristics of a leader, his or her currency, is their track record, the relationships they form, and then people's trust. You get those three together. That's what allows a leader to be a great leader.
That's a great summary. And we're going to talk more about the investments you've made, especially in cybersecurity, a little bit later.
Okay.
The question I have now is, when did you know it was the right time to step down?
That's a very smooth way of transitioning me to the next topic and get me over the next one. I knew probably 3 years before I did change that it was time for me to move to my next chapter. My dad had always told me, he said, you'll know when it's time to move on to your next chapter. And he was a doctor who moved on to doing businesses, building hotels, building subdivisions, et cetera, on it. And he enjoyed each stage. So he taught me a little bit about the future. For me, at that time especially, in order to really drive fundamental change in a company, you had to say, here's my 3 to 5 year plan that will take about that long to drive it through. And I realized at that time in Cisco, I was not willing to make the 5-year commitment and beyond. And so I said, I'm good for the next 2 to 4 years, which was a clear message to my board and to others that it wouldn't be 5, and that I was going to move on to do my next thing. And literally, it was exactly 3 years later, almost to the day, when I moved on. I moved on to something I love even more. I love being an advisor to startups. I love being their mentor, their guru. I love watching organizations grow and sharing lessons in life, including my mistakes. I love watching people build cultures and the excitement behind those cultures, and watch young leaders really blossom as they do that, and learn what Warren Buffett taught us, which is strategy and vision is really important. Culture is equally as important. And I'm competitive to a fault, as you've already figured out. Number 1 or number 2, or don't compete. So how do you really drive that through? And I get to do it in a way this dyslexic can really appreciate. I get to play 20 games at one time of chess, move all the pieces around, and they actually become correlated with common themes and direction. So I've never had more fun in life than I am right now, and it's been an honor. And I never dreamed that I'd have 9 startups that were unicorns or have gone public or sold for that value out of just 20. And the last 2.5 years, as you know, the venture business has been really hard. We had 2 of the 3 top exits for all of the strategic acquisitions with OpenGov and then Pensando. And then Rubrix went public, which went very well. And we're just closing on one more, the top defense technology transition, acquisition in the industry with D-Drone on it. And I've got a couple more that may even be even more exciting in the pipeline. So I'm having fun. I'm doing what I enjoy the most, and it's one that I wish maybe I'd even started earlier. So when did I know it was the right time? I probably could have done it a little bit earlier. What I love is change, and I love challenging, and I love learning.
Yeah, it's obvious. It's obvious that you're having fun. So,
I am.
Yeah.
I am. I should feel guilty about it, but I don't.
You have a special relationship with India, and
yes. I love India.
Yeah, you love India, obviously with Prime Minister Modi, the friendship that you have, but also the startups, like you mentioned, that you've invested, one of which we're at FairCon right now. So talk to me a little bit about safe security, and how is that shaping the future the way you imagine it?
Okay, so in the sequence you brought them up and ending with safe security with Saket Modi, I've always known there was a unique relationship potential between the U.S. and India. And I saw that in terms of the number of Indian diaspora that even lived in West Virginia. Just really smart, hardworking people, very, very common values and views. And at Cisco, I made India my second world headquarters before people even thought that way. And it wasn't just about R&D and talent. It was about literally having many of the operations there. When Prime Minister Modi came into the role, I got asked to lead what became the U.S.-India Strategic Partnership Forum and to be the chairman of that. And I first said no. And then I thought about it. I said, I think this leader is going to be very unique. And I had a chance to meet him. And I said, I'd be honored to chair that role between the businesses, both large ones and small ones, but to take it to a different level, to make it the strategic partnership and the example for how two countries can work together in the world, affecting the lives of every citizen in both countries, to think about how you can change the standard of living together and grow the economies and do it inclusive across 50 states in the U.S. and 29 states in India. And that was our dream 8 years ago. And that literally is what Prime Minister Modi and President Biden announced last summer, was that vision in terms of the direction. I believe we're just getting started. I think the evolution has been amazing. I think in the first 5 years that Prime Minister Modi was in power, he set the stage for the next 5. And the next 5 he was in power, I think he set the stage for the next 25 years. And in this current next 5 years, I think he'll set the stage for the century. And so I believe he is the best leader in the world. I think he has an ability to understand technology and business and inclusion in ways that others do not get. He's a good risk taker and very effective in his communication style. He inspires hope and belief, and then he produces results, and he holds people accountable for the implementation. Within that, we both agreed when we talked about Digital India and the 11 platforms within it, one of them had to be a startup India. And in his early years, India was not the place you did startups. It was challenging. And we had the large companies, the Tatas of the world, and the Reliances of the world, and the consulting companies, but very few startups. And yet startups are where the majority of innovation was going to happen in the future, and job creation and inclusion. You can do it across geographies, you can do it across ages, et cetera, within it. And so it is that view about startups that we shared a common passion about how can we do that in India. And by the way, I'm doing the same thing in the U.S. across 50 states, including my home state of West Virginia, and bringing that state back to leadership, which we're in the process of doing. But then it comes down to safe technology and Saket Modi. At the time I was in India, I made a decision to invest in one company called Unifor, and it's been really great in AI and customer service. But the first time I met Saket, no relationship to the Prime Minister, but he outlined to me a vision of cybersecurity and making it easy to understand and being able to prioritize it. And all of a sudden, this is what I'd always asked for as a CEO. I wanted to know, how secure was I? What are my risks? How am I versus my peers? Because I want to judge how good or not I am versus the peers on it. for areas that I'm exposed, if I put investment into them, will I get the returns that we want? And how do we build a risk management scenario into that covers everything from my business running to my M&A acquisitions to supply chain? And he outlined a vision that I got immediately. And today at the Fair conference, he gave a presentation. By the way, I was so proud of him. The best presentation I've seen from him, but maybe one of the best I've ever seen out of a startup. And with the demos and everything in-house, and he brought this to life. And every chief information security officer in the room got it. This was a fundamental change. And so it's fun when you watch one of these companies really develop, do very well. When we first met, we were just in India alone. He and I both agreed he needed to come to the States and then develop his customers here in the States, which he did a very good job of doing. And so it's something I'm an honor to be a part of, and I'm very proud to be his friend, his sponsor, his guru, and always there for him.
Yeah, you can see that, and you guys had a great fireside chat as well.
Oh,
so,
we did very well.
Looked like
although
fun.
he asked me a couple tough questions, but I'll forgive him for that.
Not as tough as this one. This one's easier, right?
Okay. No, I don't think so.
Okay.
But I love the way where you're taking me.
Yeah.
Now, usually when you're nice like that, you're about to ask me a really tough question.
I'm not. You've also been awarded the Padma Bhushan in India, which is such a big deal, and it's so beautiful that relationship has been honed and fostered over your period of time. You also said recently that India will be the largest economy in the world at some point. So how is that vision aligning to everything that we just spoke about?
Well, first, in terms of the Padma Bhushan Award, it was the biggest award I've ever won in my life, and I didn't understand it at the time I awarded it. On it. It was only after my phone lit up and I had literally hundreds of thousands of texts come in and saying congratulations that I took the step back to understand how unique it was, because I didn't even know I was being considered for it. And while I'd won many awards that I'm very proud of, top corporate citizenship award in the U.S. From President Bush and Secretary Condi Rice, and from President Obama and Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, top CEO in the world several times on various awards, etc. The Defense Gold Medal from France, which no foreign business leaders ever won, which is a tremendous award. And caring about people meant a lot to me. But this one meant very special, partially because I feel about India, but how unique it is in terms of a social award about society and making a difference for it. And so winning that was a tremendous honor, and it's something I hope I continue to earn the trust of the Indian people as we go forward. Now to the second part of the question, which was?
India is going to be the largest economy in the world.
That was an easy one.
Oh, okay.
You know, it was so amazing because everybody said, John, you're the biggest bull on India, which I am, and very proud of me. And the financial shows would always lead with that quote. And each time they said, where are you betting? I'd say, I bet on India. And then a year later, where are you betting? I would double down on India. And even as recently as the Milken Conference this last summer here in LA, they asked me my views about where to bet. And I said, if you were smart, you'd take about half of your retirement income and put it in the major trading funds in India, and it will outperform your individual picks here in the US and around the world with high probability. But what I didn't understand is it was easy for me to see the skills that Prime Minister Modi had, and that at first he would change India. And that as he began to change India, as you inspire hope and belief in the future, and a vision on how people can help achieve that approach, how you gain momentum, and then suddenly you're able to move India from an emerging economy to a developed economy, moving faster than anywhere else in the world. And so it was easy for me to see how we'd go from number 10 to number 8 to number 5. But I think what shocked people was when I was able to say, I think we don't understand the math. With the speed that is occurring, and Prime Minister Modi deserves a huge amount of the credit for this, and a great citizenship, many of which are watching your podcast today or listening to it, is the ability to inspire let's think completely out of the box and to achieve growth that has never been done before. And if you look at a population of 1.4 billion people, average age 26 years and younger, most optimistic young people in the world, you look at startups taking off as well as big companies, you look at inclusion across the majority of India, regardless of your gender or your religious view, et cetera, in the country or the state that you're from, and you see this innovation occurring, the math was simple. India's going to go from 1.4 billion people to 2 billion. They're going to have the fastest growing standard of living every year, barring the surprise, for not just the next decade, but if they do it right over this next decade for the century, it will be India's century. And I just did the math, and it was simple. Being dyslexic, you walk into this. I just go A, B, Z. It was very obvious. And I said it on stage in front of Prime Minister Modi at his visit to Washington, where I had the honor of introducing him to the business community at the Kennedy Center there, and in front of Secretary Lincoln, who was the other speaker at the event. And I said, congratulations on what's occurred, but what people may not understand is you are putting the foundation for becoming the largest economy in the world. And I think it is inevitable if India executes well. And my American counterparts were just quiet as could be. And even some of my strongest supporters in the House and the Senate said, John, we normally agree with you. India will be second. And I said, no, you do the math. Yeah. And I think we are going to see that occur. I think that will be the benefit of India and the U.S. I think by working together, both economies will grow dramatically faster. The U.S. may grow 1% faster. India may grow 2% faster than it would have without this tight relationship. If you play it out by the end of the century, if I were to take a calculated risk and making projections, I would say by the end of the century, India will probably be 90% bigger economy-wise than China and probably 30% bigger than the U.S. And it does speak how win-wins can occur between the two largest democracies, the two largest dreamers, the two largest countries that know how to be inclusive of their citizens and who will make mistakes along the way, which I'm sure that we will. And there'll be times where we don't always agree. That is true in life, even among very good friends on it. But I am the optimist on India would be an understatement, and I'm the optimist on what India and the U.S. can do together.
Yeah, and I've seen so many of your interviews where you've reinstated this so many times. So it's lovely to hear it firsthand from you especially.
My honor.
We have 10 minutes, so I'm going to make this
a lightning round.
Yeah.
Okay.
You've also interfaced with so many other leaders, right?
Yes.
There are anecdotes of you and, say, Steve Jobs and the internet. Talk to me a little bit about some of the experiences that you've had that people would love to hear about.
Well, there are a number of them, and they sometimes will come from very famous people. Sometimes they'll come from people that are just an individual contributor in life and you learn from. For Steve in particular, he was an amazing creative leader. He just somehow knew how to build products and did an amazing job on doing it. I had the iOS license and the iPhone trademarks, and so we had a little bit of give and take over that. But I think I learned from Steve, how do you do transitions and how do you move rapidly? Shimon Peres, the late president of Israel, he taught me leadership was not only lonely during the tough times, but leadership also had the courage to take risk. And that how do you really have the courage to think like a teenager in a startup as a country? And they became the startup country, and he was the key driver behind that. I think when you look at other leaders, President Bush I learned a lot from, and he had a love for India, as you know, as well. But he was probably his best during the crisis of 9/11 and how he dealt with the challenges. And he asked me to come to the Rose Garden during the middle of that when the Capitol was shut down and everything else. He was clearly fixed in terms of how do we get this fixed and how do we get our country back online. So how did he handle pressure on it? I could go on. Macron candidly has given France a chance to reinvent itself. We'll see how the French do with that long term. I worry about France without Macron, but I think he was another leader that I learned an awful lot from. But I think for the viewers, I think having mentors that you can learn from and can be your sponsors and to share with you the direction. I learned from a lot of the employees at Cisco, and I learned from the culture and making a difference. And when people say, what are you perhaps most proud of at Cisco? It's the culture we built. So many of our young people that we help during tough times. And I followed every illness of every employee, their spouse or their children, and we were there for them like no one else. But when you see a young child that wasn't supposed to live even through birth, and because of the way we handle that uniquely with the insurance companies and the hospitals and the doctors, a year later I was able to hold the young child on stage. Or when one of our employees had a very tough battle with cancer, and she said, John, the only thing that I ask you to do is watch out for my daughter and help her understand that her dad did everything possible to try to save his wife and her mother. And I did that, and it was hard because I said, if you want to blame somebody, blame me, because I'm giving advice on the medical approach, and yet helping that young person graduate from college many years later and go forward. So I think your ability to really make a difference in life and to make a difference for the people that you love and around you is a key thing that I'm very, very proud of. And I encourage many of your viewers to rethink about, is business just business where the people are relevant? Or is business like a family where you hold your family very accountable more than anybody else, but also one that you can do amazing things together if you trust and care about each other?
That's beautiful. I'm going to close with two questions. The first is, let's talk a little bit about your family, your wife, and their role through this journey, right? Because it's seen so many ups and downs. So what has been that foundation?
Well, I was very fortunate that I married my high school sweetheart, and she's put up with me for 50 years.
Wow.
And she is my perfect balance in life. We're a little bit different in our risk-taking, and I'm a little bit more outgoing, and I love living on the edge. She's a little bit more conservative, but our values are identical. And during the good times and the bad, she's always been there. And even when I was down a little bit and I said, I really don't want to go to work today, she said, you have to go, that's your job. And by the way, you're the CEO.
You better be going.
You better be going on it. And then occasionally, and it doesn't happen very often, but if I get a little bit overconfident, she brings me back to earth pretty quickly. I have two wonderful children, my son and my daughter, both of whom have been very successful in their life and in business, and two great grandchildren in Autumn and Jack that are just amazing to watch. So from a family perspective, it started with my parents, and I come through our family. We're a very tight family.
Yeah, that's so sweet. You married your high school sweetheart. I didn't know that.
Yes.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, before she was smart enough to turn me down.
I'm down to the last question,
Sure.
John. It's been so amazing. As you know, the youth of India predominantly watches our podcast, and
Yes.
they really look to it for advice and value that they can derive. So what are the three things that you think that the youth of India should focus on for holistic growth and holistic success?
If I were to be limited to three, the first is, I would say, continue to dream and dream bigger. India's youth is the most optimistic in the world, but that's part of what is gaining the momentum. I think we can accomplish even more than what this youth group is currently dreaming. The second thing is, education is the equalizer in life along with technology. Get a good education, and in education, get the foundation for what you can make a good living on and support your family in the future. The third advice I would give you would probably be a blended version of the culture. Culture is as important as anything else in your future success. How you treat people determines what job you get, how you get through challenges in life, etc. But if I had to limit it to one, dream big. I think India is still underestimating how big this country is going to be in the future in a very positive way, both its effect on its citizens, the effect on the United States and the world.
Thank you so much, John. It's been lovely. And we've made time. So I'm really happy that you're going to be making your flight on time. But
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And it's been so amazing.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If you like this episode, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit that bell icon. Thank you all for being the best community, and I'll see you soon.